Is Tennessee the new beast of the East? That's what Matt Hayes said, according to an article he wrote for Saturday Down South. We'll break down that article, plus Ben McKee jumps on to talk a little Tennessee hoops and to preview a massive baseball weekend for the Volunteers. All that and more coming up here on a Thursday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, welcome into a Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. It is your place for your Tennessee football, basketball, baseball, athletics, all that type of content and more. Your first listen each and every day. Can't thank you enough for that. I'm your host, Eric Cain. You can find this podcast at Locked On Vols and find me on Twitter at _Cainer. And you can find this show on YouTube by searching Locked On Vols. Please thank you for subscribing and watching the show there. Continue to subscribe. Trying to get up to 1,000 on there, so I appreciate that so much. If you're trying to watch on YouTube, again, I do apologize. Here in segment 1, you're not seeing any video. Again, Restream is up to its old tricks again. Just pathetic service. For the later two segments of this show, we're going to get on video. We're going to go to Zoom when I talk to Ben McKee. So if you're trying to watch it, do apologize, but nonetheless, you can still hear it, and you can get it on all of your audio platforms as well. Want to discuss an article Matt Hayes put out there from Saturday Down South. The title is Laugh All You Want, but Tennessee is the next elite SEC beast. Really? I mean, okay, you're kind of perking up in your chair a little bit, hearing those words. It's like, all right, you still got Georgia, just won a national championship. You still got Florida, which, I mean, most of a ton of recruits come from the state of Florida. That is no secret, okay? You have other teams in the SECs that are getting better and better. Kentucky continues to be more consistent. Missouri's got a good offensive coach. It just kind of is what it is. Now, Tennessee's certainly right in that mix as well, don't get me wrong, but laugh all you want. Tennessee is the next elite SEC East beast. Interesting. Now, Matt Hayes, he's written for a number of different publications. He's a longtime college football writer covering the SEC. He's based out of Orlando, and he knows what he's talking about and everything. But he's pretty much making the case that in this day and age in football, and something we've talked about too, but in this day and age in football, you have got to score points, and I believe that. You got to score points. And outside of Georgia in 2021, Georgia being the outlier, offenses have been the name of the game the last, probably 6 to 7 years, right? He gives a couple of examples. LSU overwhelmed Alabama in 2019 with an offensive so devastating, it simply had to outscore Alabama, among other big games, including Florida, Texas, and Ole Miss, to win the SEC and the national title. Florida in 2020 had an offense that was so statistically as good as LSU or better than any in school history. It was 3 blown defensive stands away, one fumbled interception, 2 drive extending personal foul calls on third down stops. Remember the one against LSU, Shoegate. And then all those from beating the Tide in the SEC championship game by simply scoring more points. Now, Georgia, again, was the outlier last year. Georgia proved that with an elite defense, and we're talking this Georgia defense that was one of the best defenses in the last 3 decades, plus a mediocre quarterback and good offensive linemen and some skilled players around him, that can go and win you a national championship. But according to Matt Hayes, Georgia has been the outlier, okay? So here comes Tennessee. A good start in year number 1. Tennessee has an offensive coach. Tennessee has a coach that comes in with a system that's explosive. You run a whole lot of plays. And then you found your quarterback, Hendon Hooker, inserted into the starting lineup in September. And because those two things are coming back, and because of where the offense was at the end of year number 1, with the Music City Bowl scoring 46 points? I can't remember. I've slept since then. But scoring all those points against a Purdue team towards the end of the season, scoring all those points in a shootout win in Lexington, leading Georgia at the end of one, making a one-possession game with Alabama late into the fourth quarter at one point in time. Tennessee, there's reason to believe that the Volunteers are not going to slow down offensively. Now, you did lose Velus Jones. You did lose Javonte Payton. You did lose Cade Mays on the offensive line. Tyon Evans, who was your starting running back for points and times last year, he's at Louisville. So it's not like you're bringing everybody back, because that's not the case, but you do bring back your quarterback, and you bring back your best playmaker on the outside and being Cedric Tillman. That is a great, great recipe for success. You bring back pretty much your 1B starting running back. You bring back 4 or 5 offensive linemen. You bring back 2 tight ends. I mean, Tennessee's, the cupboard's not bare by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, you do have to replace those 2 playmakers at wide receiver in Jones and Payton, but the cupboard is not bare. So the thought is that Tennessee will pick up right where it kind of left off, or, take a step in year number 2 in the system. Everybody should be a little bit more comfortable in year number 2. Spring practice is about to start here in a couple weeks. There's not going to be a guessing game. It's not going to be trying to get used to the new system, operating out of the shotgun, doing the RPOs, all that type of stuff. None of that. You should be very, very comfortable in what you're running now. So does that mean you can take another step? And if you do take another step and Tennessee finishes with 9, maybe 10 wins, maybe, is Hendon Hooker in the Heisman conversation potentially? None of that's off the table, according to Matt Hayes in his article from Saturday Down South. So offense is the name of the game. Tennessee's offense, as long as Josh Heupel is going to be here, it will be likely leading the conference in a number of offensive statistical categories. Will it be good enough to outscore Georgia consistently? Because Georgia's going to come to play. Georgia's going to play defense. We know that. Will it be good enough to take down Florida consistently? And then whatever spot team in the SEC East, decides to rear its ugly head that year, whether it be Kentucky, whether it be Missouri, maybe South Carolina and Shane Beamer, whatever the case may be, will Tennessee's offense be good enough to just simply outscore them? That is what Matt Hayes is saying right now. So it might not be in 2022, but it could be. It might not be in 2023, but I think by then it needs to start being, right? Is Tennessee the new beast of the SEC East? Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm not going to read the whole article for you, but very interesting. Some nice little stats to back it up and everything. This is from, again, Matt Hayes at Saturday Down South. So something to think about. And we're going to learn more about Tennessee's offense whenever spring practice begins here in just a couple of weeks. That's set to begin the week of March the 21st. I'll be covering it, of course. We'll bring you audio, video, and tons of practice analysis and all that. But that's just a couple weeks away. Tennessee is getting ready for a monster junior day that's coming up on Saturday when so many big-time prospects, 4 stars, a couple 5 stars, a lot of quality football players will be on campus going through, meetings with coaches and seeing the campus and seeing the facilities, going to the basketball game, all that type of stuff. So, there'll be a lot of, I don't know if there'll be any news coming out of the weekend in terms of commitments, but we will talk to some of those prospects, and we'll it's very important for Tennessee because you're laying the foundation now, specifically with a couple of these guys, to where you hope that they will commit to the University of Tennessee by late spring and in the summer sometime. These junior days are huge because a lot of times it's the first time these student athletes get to see campus in person, and it's not like it's not an official visit where you can bring in like 100 kids and just, everybody, can come across and see everything. So it's some good stuff there. So that's coming up this weekend. And again, spring practice is right around the corner. But again, can Tennessee be the new beast of the SEC East? I mean, I don't think Georgia's going to win a national championship again. I think Florida's not going to be down for long. But Tennessee could be in that conversation, especially if you consistently score and run this offense the way it did in year number 1. So some interesting stuff there. I encourage you to give it a listen. I'll try to link that in the show notes as well. The NFL Combine has started this week live from Indianapolis. We talked with Matthew Butler on last week's program. So Matthew Butler's in action, Alontae Taylor's in action, Velus Jones Jr.'s in action, and Cade Mays. All 4 of those players for Tennessee are live in Indianapolis. In Indianapolis, say that 10 times fast. And going through the biggest job interviews of their life. We've got tons and tons of our Locked On personnel that's in Indy this week and next week, and hopefully we'll bring them on to talk a little Tennessee at the Combine for Alontae Taylor, Cade Mays, Matthew Butler, and Velus Jones Jr. All right, we'll get into Ben McKee, my conversation with him, a little hoops talk as well as baseball talk, but all the talk is about those brackets and what's to come in the SEC tournament, and eventually, where you're going to be positioned come the NCAA tournament. March Madness, it's just a couple weeks away. With that being said, you need to start thinking about what you want to do with your brackets. Are you trying to go usual, or are you trying to be the best? We've done our homework, and we're going to run our brackets through RunYourPool.com. Along with the standard brackets, RunYourPool offers game types like Survivor and Pick'ems. They have options to edit scoring. They offer more intel on making picks, something that ESPN and CBS brackets just don't do. If you've got a business, RunYourPool can help create some of that madness magic, and you can play alongside your employees or sometimes even your clients. Plus, they offer full white glove customer support, a customer branding, and one of the easiest 3-minute setups that you were ever going to find. Clearly, we believe in Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All rules and details will be made available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. Hey, thanks again for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out the Locked On Bracket Breakdown March 14th right here on your Locked On Vols podcast and YouTube feeds. College basketball experts Chris Gordy, Andy Patton, betting expert Lee Sterling. They're going to give you some in-depth breakdowns on every single matchup. Again, that's the Locked On Bracket Breakdown March the 14th. Welcome on my buddy Ben McKee. He's the co-host of the Swain Event, works with me over at Volquest.com here for the rest of the show. Ben, what's going on, dude?
Eric, what's up, buddy?
Just hanging in there. It's crossover season. A lot of exciting things happening right now. Earlier in the week, you had Tennessee basketball that survived in Athens. Georgia had nothing to lose. It's a really bad basketball team. Tennessee had some positioning to lose, but I thought it was a fine ball game. Good to see Josiah Jordan-James go off the way he did. Tennessee continues to rebound the basketball well. Your overall thoughts from Tennessee's win at Georgia earlier in the week?
Yeah, just kind of a ho-hum win for the Vols. Josiah Jordan-James, obviously the story in that one, he was absolutely tremendous. A career high, 23 points, was 8 of 12 shooting, I believe, 3 of 7 from the three-point line. And really, he was 8 of 11 and 3 for 6 because right before halftime, he heaved it from the other free throw line. And that counts as a miss, obviously. So he shot the ball tremendously in that game. When you look at the box score, 8 rebounds, 2 away from a triple-double. He had 3 offensive rebounds. He had 5 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals. And my favorite stat with any basketball player, 0 turnovers.
Yep.
Josiah Jordan-James was tremendous. And for the rest of them, it was just kind of ho-hum. I think there were external circumstances that were distracting or affecting, I guess I should say, the Vols. We all know the situation with Zakai Ziegler, but what I'm referencing is the knee injuries that Tennessee is dealing with right now, on top of what Zakai is dealing with in his personal life, his family losing their home to a fire back in Long Island, and I just can't even imagine what it's like to go through something like that. But on top of that, he's been hampered by a knee injury, and I thought you could tell he doesn't have that same burst. I thought you could also tell that Santiago Vescovi is going through the same thing. He did not have the same burst, and you can really see it on the defensive end. He's been able to stay in front of guys all year long and was not able to do so on Tuesday. And after he made those first 3 threes to start the game, it wasn't a very good Santiago Vescovi performance. So and the post play was what it was. It just is what it is at this point. You have a bunch of guys, but not one guy. And you hope that one guy can step up and have a good night and kind of carry the post. And nobody really did that, but Jonas Adu stepped in and made some plays. Georgia cuts it to 4 at the end of the game, 64-60, I believe. John Fulkerson gets back-to-back baskets, and Rick Barnes said after the game that they need to get him the ball more. And he wanted to get them the ball more and called a timeout. And what do you know? They did, and Fulke helped ice that game. So ho-hum, but Josiah Jordan-James, tip of the hat, because that was a heck of a performance. I don't care if it is against 6-24 Georgia.
Yeah, you brought up the Zakai Ziegler family situation, and yeah, it's heartbreaking. But Tennessee organized a GoFundMe and trying to get out in front of it before so many gracious Tennessee fans would probably start 50 of them on their own. But Tennessee wanted to get out in front of it. I believe the goal was set for about $50,000, and in just a matter of a couple hours, it was already exceeding $200,000. So no shock whatsoever there. Clay Travis, he submitted, I think, 100,000, or excuse me, he submitted $1,000. There's a big difference there, but still very, 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 very gracious. But you're seeing, Tennessee fans from across the SEC college basketball jumping on this. And if you haven't already, Tennessee has shared that link. I'll put that link in the show notes as well if you guys want to, donate anything towards the Zakai Ziegler situation there with his family. But now you mentioned the post play too, and I'm to the point to where, I mean, of course you want one of those guys to kind of help in the scoring, and I think that's not asking an awful lot. But gosh, I don't care if it's all four of them getting in there. I mean, Uros Palaf just had 10 rebounds. John Fulkerson didn't have many rebounds this last game, but he was the guy that stepped up, scored 12 points, especially in the second half, when Tennessee needed it. Jonas Adu's been playing really, really well here lately. We all remember Brandon Huntley Hatfield's game against Auburn on Saturday, where he had 5 offensive rebounds. Your favorite stat of that game, the most or just as many rebounds offensively that Walker Kessler had the entire game. So if all those guys continue to play well, defend decently, run the boards, and one of those guys jump up and give you something scoring to go along with what Kennedy's going to give you, what Vesvy's going to give you, what you hope Ziegler and or Josiah Jordan-James will help out as well. I think that's a pretty good winning formula for the University of Tennessee. But nonetheless, a monster showdown this weekend, a chance potentially, depending on how tonight goes, in SEC regular season titles on the line, but a big one in Thompson-Boling Arena as Arkansas comes to town.
Yeah, and a rematch, and I'm sure Tennessee is going to want revenge after how the game went in Fayetteville 2 weeks ago. Just in my opinion, I don't know if you feel the same way, Cain, but it doesn't really feel like Tennessee lost that basketball game. And I know the final score obviously says that they did, and I think it was 9 points or right at double digits. The final score is not pretty, but I truly believe, and I'm not one to blame the refs. I'm truly not. My friends and the people I work with, they can vouch for me. I'm not one who blames the refs every single game, but I truly feel like in that particular game, the refs had more to do with Tennessee's performance than Tennessee actually had with its performance, just with some very questionable foul calls that I think were quite frankly incorrect. Rick Barnes obviously thought that they were incorrect. He said so after the game on Saturday, and then he came back that Monday and said the same thing, that he still thought that the calls were wrong. I'm paraphrasing there. He didn't say that word for word, but he alluded to him thinking that the calls were wrong. And that just got Tennessee out of rhythm, and they could not recover from being out of rhythm. Not only are your main guys not on the floor, Josiah Jordan-James, Santiago Vescovi, Kennedy Chandler. I want to say Zakai was in some foul trouble as well. Your post players were in foul trouble. And not saying that every single call was wrong, but the calls that got your main guys into foul trouble, they were wrong, quite frankly. And not only do you not have them on the floor and you have to try to piece it together, but Santiago Vescovi explained, after those calls are made, not only are you thinking twice about attacking the rim and driving the lane, penetrating, but if you do decide to penetrate and attack the basket, you kind of don't go with the same force that you typically would because you're scared that you're going to get called for a foul. Yeah. So I truly believe that they did have a ton of open shots that game, but I think because they were so out of rhythm that those shots had no chance at going down. So it really felt like Tennessee didn't actually lose the game because of poor performance. It felt like the referees had a big hand in doing so. I don't think in Thompson-Boling Arena this weekend that Arkansas is going to get the benefit of the calls. So I actually feel good for Tennessee going into this weekend, and especially with how Thompson-Boling Arena has been such a huge factor for the team this year. I would be surprised if Arkansas won this Saturday.
Yeah, I picked Tennessee to beat Auburn at home last weekend. There's no excuse to pick against Tennessee at home right now. Tennessee plays so well at home, and obviously is undefeated, but it's beaten some good teams, and that's one thing lacking. I mean, we all know this. That's one thing lacking for Tennessee's resume. It's not going to hurt Tennessee, but I mean, that's, if you point to one thing, is they don't have a key huge win away from home this year. But at home, you beat Arizona, you beat Kentucky, you beat Auburn. Can you tack on another one against Arkansas? We'll have to find out. So I'm with you. I like Tennessee in this one. I'm going to pick Tennessee Volunteers to win at home. Last thing real quick before we talk a little baseball, Benjamin, and this is just for fun. I put it out there on the Locked On Balls accounts, and basketball, it's a tournament sport. It depends on matchups and all that type of stuff, but let's just have some fun here. What's Tennessee's ceiling now? There's literally one game left in the regular season. What we know about this Tennessee team, what's the ceiling? Round of 32, Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four. So tell me the ceiling, and then how far you think Tennessee can go, just spitballing here.
I think the ceiling is Final Four, quite frankly. And who knows? Maybe that equates to the ceiling being a national championship. Rick Barnes certainly thinks so. And look, I'm not going to sit here and pick Tennessee to go to the Final Four when the bracket comes out. I think that they'll end up being an Elite 8 team, a Sweet 16 team. I think that's where they'll fall in. But it would not completely surprise me if they made the Final Four. They have the ingredients to make the Final Four, similar to how Auburn did last year, just with the way that they're playing defense and the way that the offense has looked better this second half of the season because of the leadership that has stepped up, the ball movement. Kennedy Chandler has grown a ton, and you have to have great guard play in March. And Tennessee has that on top of an elite defense. So I think that gives the ceiling a Final Four national championship game type of ceiling. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, but I certainly feel different than I did when they lost to Kentucky at the beginning of January, and they were 2-3 in conference play and had back-to-back embarrassing losses. It felt like it was going to be another first-round exit for Tennessee, but I think they have a Final Four ceiling.
Yeah, football's over right now, but of course we're talking college basketball. Pro basketball is in full steam as the Lakers are 7 games under 500 in year 19. All the latest odds, all of the player props, performances, your sports podcast, your sports news. You can get all at betonline.net. It's your number one spot for everything sports related, college and pro. All right, BetOnline, it remains the number one spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball either. It's not just football. BetOnline.net, your source for hockey, for boxing, for UFC, odds, Olympic coverage happened just a couple of weeks ago. You get all that and more at BetOnline.net. So today you can head on over to the website, or you can use your mobile device as well and learn more about the latest trends and all the action again at BetOnline.net. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. A final segment left here on this Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. I'm Eric Cain. That is Ben McKee over at VolQuest.com and, of course, co-host of the Swain Event, talking a little Tennessee hoops. And now let's shift gears, Ben. Let's talk a little Tennessee baseball. It's been a fun start to the season. A 3-game sweep over Georgia Southern, 3-game sweep over Iona. But I think Tennessee could have, had a more competent battle against Farragut High School last weekend than Iona, to be completely honest with you. Nice midweek win over ETSU earlier this week, but it all changes, Ben. It all changes. Tennessee goes to Minute Maid Park in Houston, Texas for the Shriners Hospital Collegiate Classic type deal, whatever it's called. And you'll take on number 1 Texas. You'll take on Baylor, and you're going to play Oklahoma. A huge weekend coming up for Tony Vitello's bunch.
Yes, a huge weekend, and I think we're going to learn a lot about Tennessee this weekend. We're not going to, or I should say the final book isn't going to be written on Tennessee this weekend. This weekend is not going to dictate the entire season or dictate that Tennessee is going to miss the NCAA tournament if it goes poorly, or that they're going to win the College World Series if they sweep the weekend. But we will learn a lot about Tennessee, and we're going to learn a lot about some pitchers who are facing legitimate competition for the first time. Chase Burns, the true freshman, starting against Texas, presumably on Friday. I'm sure Chase Dolander faced some good competition at Georgia Southern last year before he transferred to Tennessee, but this will be his first step up in competition at Tennessee in a big league ballpark, and he's been electric so far. So excited to see how he performs against Baylor on Saturday, once again, assuming that he does start on Saturday. And then there's some other newish arms as well. Drew Beam, the true freshman who started the last 2 Sundays. How does he look? And then there's some bullpen arms. Ben Joyce, how does that fastball play against better competition? So a lot of new faces in the pitching staff and starting rotation, and even in the bullpen. And you still want to see how guys have gotten better from last year as well. Redmond Walsh, Kirby Cannell, Camden Sewell, I think is going to have one of the best seasons in the SEC by any pitcher. I just think his stuff is so electric. He has a wipeout slider right now that is unhittable. He's strutting around the mound like he's Drew Gilbert walking off a team in the NCAA tournament. Camden Sewell just looks absolutely tremendous right now, and he is kind of the underrated arm in that rotation. So not just with the rotation am I curious to kind of learn about them, but even the lineup. You kind of know what you're going to get from Luke Lipsius at first, Jordan Beck in right field, Drew Gilbert in center, Evan Russell behind the plate in terms of his hitting ability. Do want to see him in terms of his fielding and do teams try to run on him this weekend. But just in terms of the bats, you know what you're going to get from Evan for the most part, but you don't really know what you're going to get against legitimate competition from Trey Lipscomb, who's been on fire. I do think it'll carry over, but still a question mark until he proves that it will. Jarrell Ortega at second, Cortland Lawson at shortstop. You've got some JUCO signees, Logan Chambers, Seth Stevenson. So although you do have some familiar faces in that lineup, you do have some new faces in key roles playing big-time competition for the first time. And we're going to learn. Again, if they struggle this weekend, any of those individuals, it doesn't mean that they're going to stink the rest of the year. But I do think we'll at least get a gauge for where they currently are, much more than we did against Iona. That is for sure.
Yeah, you're talking about all the new arms and how all the attention's on Chase Burns and Chase Dolander, Drew Beam, Ben Joyce out of the pen, hitting 103 a couple of times, and deservingly so. I think you can make the case that the most valuable arm on this team, potentially when it's all said and done, might be Camden Sewell in that role coming out of the bullpen, and he looked fantastic in 3 innings and a third on Tuesday night. Ben, tell us a little bit more about these teams. You don't have to get too far in depth. We can check out the Diamond Balls podcast. I know you'll have a couple of interviews on there this week. You and I will chat as well, going in depth on all 3 of these teams. But tell us a little bit about Texas. Of course, Tennessee saw Texas in Omaha last year. A little bit about Texas, a little bit about Baylor, and a little bit about Oklahoma. What do Vol fans have to look forward to this weekend?
Yeah, Texas is the big one to pay attention to. They're throwing, presumably, Pete Hansen on Friday, who played a part in putting Tennessee out of Omaha last year in that second game that Tennessee played in the College World Series. So Tennessee has payback on their minds, I guess you could say. And he is arguably the best pitcher in the country. I'm real fascinated by Texas and kind of learning about them this weekend, as I am Tennessee, because Texas, the number 1 overall team in the country by many polls, but Alabama just went to Austin, and Alabama did get swept, but on Friday and Saturday, both pitchers duels, and I believe they were both 1-run games. I believe Friday was 1-0, and then I believe Saturday was 2-0 or 2-1, something of that nature. Very low scoring, close game. And then Sunday, Alabama kind of ran out of pitching, and Texas ran away with it late. But Texas loaded with talent, especially on the mound. They probably have the best group of pitchers in the country in terms of pro prospects, but that Alabama series, who Alabama turned around on Tuesday and lost to UT Martin at home. Yeah. Is Alabama better than we anticipated, or is Texas maybe not as good as we anticipated? So Tennessee's going to have revenge on their mind for that game. And again, kind of learning and seeing if this Tennessee team can legitimately hit. They'll get a big test right off the bat with Pete Hansen on Friday, and we'll definitely learn there. So that's kind of the thing to watch about Texas, is that they just have a dominant pitching staff. But can they swing the bats? Chase Burns will definitely be put to the test, because they do have talent, but they haven't necessarily been tested just yet. And I spent the majority of that time on Texas because Texas is definitively better than Baylor and Oklahoma. Tennessee will play Baylor on Saturday, and they're off to an interesting start, Eric. They're 3-4 currently. They were swept in Maryland, or by Maryland, at home opening weekend, but then they bounced back this past weekend and took 2 of 3 from a top 25 Duke team. So is Baylor the team that got swept at home by Maryland to start the year, or are they the team that bounced back with a series win over Duke? That'll be interesting to figure out. And Oklahoma's kind of been a mixed bag as well to start the year. They beat Auburn in their season opener. They were playing at Globe Life Field, the Ranger Stadium in Arlington, as part of a tournament to start the year. They beat Auburn on Friday 3-0. They turn around and lose to Arizona 14-4 on Saturday, and then beat Michigan on Sunday 6-1. And then they were actually back at Globe Life, the Ranger Stadium, this past weekend for a second straight weekend because of weather in Oklahoma, and took 2 of 1 against Northwestern State. But Northwestern State was more competitive than people thought. So you didn't ask for a prediction, but I kind of feel like a 2-1 weekend for Tennessee. If I had to put money on it, I would probably pick Texas to beat Tennessee, but then Tennessee to bounce back on Saturday and Sunday, beat Baylor, beat Oklahoma, because quite frankly, I think Tennessee's the better team when it comes to Baylor and Oklahoma.
It's going to be a fun weekend. We're going to learn a lot about Tennessee, learn more about Tennessee, and as it continues to come back, a couple more series, and then SEC play will begin here before you know it. Ben, you are going to be at Minute Maid Park. You're going to be there all weekend long. Everybody can give you a follow at what's your Twitter handle? B McKee 14. Is that it?
Ben McKee 14.
Oh, Ben McKee 14. So give a follow, Ben McKee 14. Follow along on Volquest.com as well. He'll have running game day threads and tons of coverage from Tennessee at this Shriners Classic in Texas. Also, encourage you guys to listen to the broadcast. Tennessee baseball will be making its season debut on 99.1 The Sports Animal. And here's the thing, the easiest way I can explain it, because of the SEC women's basketball tournament in Nashville this weekend, and right out of the gate, there's a conflict, right? Because the Lady Vols are the 3 seed and had that late game. Whenever Tennessee baseball is playing, if it's not on 99.1 FM, it's going to be on 990 AM. The only reason it won't be on the FM dial is because the Lady Vols are playing. So if you turn on the Sports Animal, turn it to the FM 99.1, and you hear the Lady Vols, go to AM 990. You'll be able to hear John Wilkerson on the call for Tennessee in this classic. So we'll be on the radio. And of course, you can follow all that along with Ben McKee as well. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen today and every day. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy, former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker. They bring you the latest in the NFL Draft, insights and analysis of college football, plus NFL front offices. It's available anywhere you get your podcast. Give Locked On NFL Draft your second listen here today. Ben McKee, thanks so much, man. Appreciate you stopping by and talking a little Tennessee hoops, Tennessee baseball. Fun time of the year with crossover season, and a whole lot to talk about.
Thanks, buddy. Always appreciate you.
Absolutely. Give Ben a follow, Ben McKee 14 on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube, and we'll finish off a show coming up tomorrow here on Locked On Vols, getting into tons more, plus an Arkansas preview. That's what you have to look forward to tomorrow here on Locked On Vols.